Have you ever wondered what kind of warning a small group of early humans would try to send across almost 1 million years of distance if they knew that their survival depended on being understood by those who would come after them? Imagine walking through a world where every shadow, every movement in the grass, every shifting sound in the wind could mean life or death. In that reality, knowledge was not merely information. It was a shield, a lifeline, a quiet message carried forward by the few who managed to perceive what others could not. The world of 900,000 years ago was not ruled by strength alone, but by a form of wisdom that grew in silence, forged in darkness, whispered in gestures and instincts rather than in words. When we try to reconstruct that moment, it becomes clear that the earliest humans lived suspended between fear and intuition. They did not have language, but they had perception. They could not write, but they could interpret signs in ways we lost and are only now beginning to rediscover. Small groups learned to detect subtle patterns in nature, tiny changes in animal behavior, the scent of weather, the stillness before danger, the rhythm of the night. These signals became their messages, their warnings, their form of ancestral communication intended to protect the next ones who would sit by the same fire or sleep under the same sky. The most intriguing part is how these early humans understood that wisdom had to be preserved, not by carving symbols or storing knowledge in physical objects, but by forming rituals of observation. These rituals created memory. They created continuity. A young member of the group would learn to watch the shadows the same way an elder had done decades before. They would sense the air changing long before a predator approached, as if guided by an inner compass shaped by generations of survival. This silent chain of knowledge became a message aimed at the future, a message they hoped would never be forgotten even when their names and faces disappeared into time. As we peel back the layers of their world, one truth stands out. They were not only surviving the environment, they were studying it, reading it, translating it. And this ability to interpret the invisible may have been the greatest wisdom they ever left behind. A legacy still echoing in us, even if we rarely notice it. And before we move forward into the deeper layers of this ancestral message, I want to know something from you. Have you ever felt guided by something you could not fully explain, almost like an old instinct waking up? Leave a comment sharing your experience, because understanding these moments helps us reconnect with the core of this story. And while you are here, make sure to like this video and check if you are already subscribed, because what comes next builds directly on the foundations we just uncovered, and you do not want to miss how this ancient wisdom evolves into the next part. In a world without spoken language. Silence was not emptiness. It was information. The earliest humans lived inside an environment where every detail mattered, and the absence of noise often carried more meaning than the presence of sound. When we reconstruct their daily reality, it becomes clear that silence functioned as a communication system long before words existed. A rustle in the leaves could warn of a predator. An unusual pause in the wind could signal that something was approaching. Even the synchronized stillness of animals nearby could reveal danger that no one had yet seen. These small groups learned to interpret silence as precisely as we interpret speech today. For them, survival depended on noticing subtle transitions in the environment. They understood that the world had rhythms, pulses that shifted constantly. When these rhythms broke, even slightly, their bodies reacted immediately. A sudden quiet in the forest was not peaceful. It was alarming. A faint vibration under the ground could indicate the movement of large animals. The distant echo of something falling could reveal the direction of risk. They lived inside an acoustic landscape far richer and more meaningful than anything we perceive today, and their ability to read it kept entire families alive. What is fascinating is that this instinct was not random. It was cultivated. Children grew up observing adults holding their breath in unison, freezing at the smallest signal. Without needing explanations, they copied these behaviors, absorbing awareness through imitation. This was the earliest form of education, not verbal instruction, but embodied learning. Every gesture was a lesson, every pause a warning, every slow exhale a message that something in the environment had shifted. The silence around them was a teacher, sculpting their senses to detect patterns that we, with our modern, noise-filled world, can barely imagine. Over time, this collective sensitivity formed the foundation of a shared mental map of their territory. They knew which trees creaked before storms, which valleys amplified animal calls, which cliffs distorted echoes. They understood how sound traveled differently at dawn than at night, and how the absence of certain natural noises often meant that predators were near. Silence became a code that allowed the group to coordinate movement, anticipate threats, and protect their young long before they developed structured communication. Recreating this environment through a cinematic lens shows us a world where awareness was constant and alertness was second nature. Their survival was shaped not by speed or strength, but by the ability to hear what others could not and feel what others ignored. This silent language connected every member of the group, allowing them to move as a single organism unified by instincts sharpened across generations. And it is within this shared, wordless awareness that the deeper layers of their ancestral wisdom began to take form, preparing the ground for the messages that would shape the future. In the harsh reality of 900,000 years ago, survival was reserved for those who could observe, interpret, and act before danger struck. Not every individual in a group had access to the subtle currents of knowledge that flowed through their environment. Only a few, the most attentive and sensitive, became the keepers of wisdom. These were the ones who noticed the faintest signs in the forest, the smallest irregularities in animal behavior, the quiet messages hidden in the rustling leaves or shifting shadows. Their perception made them indispensable. In effect, they were the early guardians of information, the ones whose instinctive decisions could determine whether the group thrived or perished. Being selected for this responsibility was not about physical strength or size. It was about awareness. Some had a natural ability to sense patterns, a connection to the environment that seemed almost supernatural. These individuals absorbed lessons in a way that others did not. They could read the rhythm of the earth, the whisper of the wind, and the silent warnings of nocturnal creatures. Each action they took was guided by accumulated knowledge passed from previous generations, sometimes in subtle gestures or repeated behaviors that seemed ordinary to outsiders but carried critical meaning. This selective transmission ensured that life-saving insights survived, even in the most perilous conditions. Within these small groups, hierarchy was built around competence, intuition, and foresight. Elders guided the attentive, teaching without words. Younger members learned by observing responses to stimuli that might seem trivial but held profound significance. A single misinterpretation could lead to disaster, which meant that lessons had to be precise and understood implicitly. The wisdom of the group was concentrated in those who could perceive invisible patterns and translate them into survival strategies. They became the silent conduits of ancestral knowledge, preserving critical information that might otherwise have vanished with the fleeting memory of those who lived only for the moment. This careful curation of insight created a culture of responsibility and observation. Being chosen to hold knowledge was both an honor and a burden. These individuals carried not just survival techniques, but also spiritual and intuitive messages that connected them to generations before and after. They were the interpreters of hidden signals, ensuring continuity in a world where time itself was measured by instinct and the reliability of senses rather than clocks or calendars. As we explore the legacy of these keepers of wisdom, it becomes clear that their ability to perceive what others could not was the true survival tool. Their choices, their instincts, and their vigilance laid the foundation for the messages that would echo through time. It is here, in the careful observation of the environment, and the disciplined attention to subtle cues, that the story of ancestral foresight begins to unfold, setting the stage for the spiritual and practical knowledge carried forward in the next generations. Long before written language or formal rituals, early humans recognized patterns in the world around them that were far more than mere coincidences. The cycles of the sun and moon, the rising and falling of tides, the migrations of animals, the sudden bursts of wind across open plains, all of these natural rhythms were carefully observed and interpreted as messages. Within small groups, these patterns were treated as spiritual codes, ways in which the environment communicated warnings, guidance, and insights. Those who learned to read them held an extraordinary advantage. They could anticipate threats, locate resources, and preserve the delicate balance of their communities. The process of understanding these rhythms was not casual. It required patience, attentiveness, and a deep connection to every element of their surroundings. A crackling fire at dusk might not just be warmth, it could signal the approach of hunters or predators. The flight path of birds might reveal hidden water sources or reveal a subtle shift in weather. Even the smallest animal sounds held meaning, interpreted as signals to move, hide, or prepare. These were not isolated observations, but part of a holistic system where nature itself became a guide, a spiritual advisor, and a silent teacher. Cinematically, this world unfolds as a choreography of shadows, whispers, and intuition. Members of the group relied on each other to maintain harmony with the environment, translating rhythms into survival strategies that seemed almost mystical. Nightfall brought a heightened sensitivity. The group's collective awareness turned to the subtle cues that could indicate danger or opportunity. This shared perception of natural codes created a sense of continuity, as if each generation were connected to the last through invisible threads woven by instinct and careful observation. What is most fascinating is how this understanding extended beyond survival. These rhythms were integrated into rituals and practices that reinforced group cohesion. Storytelling, songs, and repetitive movements became methods of encoding lessons about the environment, ensuring that even the youngest or least experienced members could interpret patterns crucial for life. Every gesture, every pause, every repetition served as a reminder that the world carried messages meant to be understood, respected, and transmitted forward. This intricate relationship between humans and nature suggests that spirituality and intuition were not separate from daily survival. They were essential tools for interpreting reality. The earliest humans did not simply react to the world. They read it, interpreted it, and internalized it as a living, breathing guide. Now, I want to hear from you. Have you ever noticed patterns in your surroundings that felt like a message, almost like an instinct speaking through nature? Share your thoughts in the comments below. Your insights might connect with this ancient wisdom in ways you cannot yet imagine. Before spoken language existed, early humans developed ways to share knowledge that were subtle, complex, and profoundly effective. Gestures, glances, and synchronized movements carried meanings that could determine survival. A flick of the hand might signal danger. A raised eyebrow could indicate a safe path. Even the position of the body while sitting or crouching conveyed information about threats or opportunities in the surroundings. These silent communications formed a rich, unspoken language, allowing groups to operate with precision and unity despite the absence of words. Observation was the key to mastering this early form of interaction. Children grew up absorbing the nuances of gestures, the rhythm of motion, and the timing of silence. They learned to Anticipate the intentions of others, reading subtleties that might escape an outsider. This was not mere imitation, but a sophisticated learning process where awareness and intuition intertwined. Individuals became attuned to each other's patterns, creating a network of understanding that extended beyond what could be explained or taught verbally. The environment itself played a role in shaping these communications. The direction of sunlight, the movement of animals, the sounds of wind and water, all were incorporated into the silent dialogue of the group. Signals were often layered, combining gestures with environmental cues to form multidimensional messages. This system ensured that even the youngest or most inexperienced members could learn essential survival skills without a single word being spoken. The ability to communicate invisibly became a cornerstone of group cohesion, safety, and efficiency. Moreover, this form of communication strengthened the social bonds of the group. Trust and attention were cultivated, as misreading a gesture could lead to danger. Elders demonstrated gestures with careful precision, ensuring that the meanings were preserved and accurately transmitted. Small groups developed conventions that lasted for generations, shaping not only survival strategies, but also the culture and identity of the community. Through cinematic reconstruction, we can imagine these moments: flickering shadows around a fire, bodies frozen in silent attention, eyes tracking subtle cues in the environment. Every action mattered, every gesture carried weight. The invisible language of early humans was not only practical but sacred, a bridge connecting generations and preserving essential wisdom. Their ability to communicate without speech set the stage for the complex transfer of knowledge that would define human progress. Each subtle sign, each intuitive gesture, ensured that critical lessons survived the passage of time, laying the groundwork for the spiritual and practical legacies that small groups would carry forward into the future. In the earliest human societies, fire was more than warmth. It was survival, protection, and a center for communal knowledge. The ones who mastered it became natural leaders, guardians of an invisible legacy. Fire illuminated the world, revealing dangers hidden in shadows, driving away predators, and creating spaces where learning could take place. Those entrusted with fire were also entrusted with wisdom, the understanding of signals, the reading of the land, the anticipation of threats, and the transmission of knowledge that could save lives. The control of fire required responsibility. It was not merely about tending flames, but maintaining an environment where lessons could be shared safely. Around the fire, elders demonstrated techniques, passed down observations about animal behaviors, and taught survival strategies without speaking in structured language. Movements, gestures, and attention to subtle environmental changes became the medium through which essential knowledge flowed. The fire served as both literal and metaphorical illumination, guiding those who watched and listened closely. Guardians of the fire were also keepers of memory. They preserved the continuity of understanding, ensuring that the lessons of previous generations were not lost to time. Each flicker of the flame highlighted symbols, shadows, and patterns that became teaching tools. Young members of the group absorbed these cues instinctively, learning to perceive what was not spoken, to anticipate dangers, and to act in harmony with the environment. This silent mentorship created a chain of wisdom that extended far beyond what words could convey. Cinematically, these moments reveal a delicate choreography, shadows dancing on walls, eyes tracking movements with precision, hands subtly signaling intentions, and bodies poised to respond instantly. Every action around the fire carried meaning. Every gesture was part of a larger system of communication that ensured the group's survival. The fire itself was a teacher, a center for observation, and a guardian of secrets that could never be exposed carelessly. These firekeepers also maintained the spiritual connection of the group. The night, illuminated by their flames, became a space for reflection, observation, and the transmission of the intangible. The lessons passed here were not only practical, but deeply intuitive, shaping instincts that would guide the group even in the absence of elders or visible threats. Their vigilance preserved not only life, but understanding, creating a lineage of perception that would carry forward through countless generations. The mastery of fire thus symbolized mastery over knowledge and survival, a delicate balance of responsibility, awareness, and intuition. Through their actions, these early humans ensured that no essential lesson, no matter how subtle, would be lost to time, setting the stage for the next layer of ancestral wisdom that would continue to unfold. Nightfall transformed the environment into a stage of heightened awareness and subtle transmissions. Without sunlight, every sound, movement, and shadow became amplified in significance. Early humans recognized that the dark hours were not simply for rest, but for learning, for intuition, and for the quiet passing of knowledge that could not be conveyed during the chaos of daylight. Around fires, under the cover of darkness, elders shared what could not be spoken openly, gestures, instinctive signals, and spiritual cues that guided the survival of the youngest and the most vulnerable. The night was a time for reflection and observation. The small groups honed their senses to detect subtle changes in the environment. The rustle of leaves could indicate a predator approaching. The flight of a bird could reveal the safest path. Even the silence of nocturnal creatures became a code to be interpreted. In this way, the darkness became a teacher, shaping perception and intuition in ways that the visible day could not. These lessons, passed through example and attention, were critical. They created a shared knowledge that went beyond immediate survival, connecting the group to a rhythm of life and danger that only those fully present could perceive. Cinematic reconstruction reveals these moments in vivid detail. The flicker of the fire casting moving shadows across attentive faces, hands signaling imperceptible warnings, eyes following subtle cues in the surroundings, and bodies poised to respond instinctively. Each action, each glance, carried layers of meaning that shaped understanding. The knowledge passed at night was sacred, often transmitted silently, relying on trust, attention, and the capacity to sense the invisible forces guiding life in the wilderness. These nocturnal transmissions were also deeply spiritual. Patterns in the stars, the movement of the moon, and the sounds of the earth were read as messages, guiding not only decisions but ethical understanding, a sense of balance and continuity of life. Young members learned to interpret these subtle signals, internalizing instincts that would carry forward into adulthood. The elders became guides not only in survival but in perception, teaching the group how to listen to the world in ways that transcended the immediate and the obvious. Now I want you to share your thoughts. Have you ever experienced a moment at night that felt like guidance, like intuition speaking through the quiet around you? Leave a comment with your experience because connecting with this instinctual awareness helps us understand the depth of the wisdom our ancestors preserved. Beyond individual perception, early humans relied on the power of collective intuition. Each member of a small group contributed to a shared awareness, a network of senses and instincts that allowed them to anticipate dangers and make decisions that ensured the survival of the community. This was not mere coincidence or luck. It was the product of constant observation, subtle communication, and learned patterns passed down over generations. Together, they created a system in which the intuition of one could influence the actions of all, transforming instinct into strategy and awareness into a protective force. Collective intuition was vital in unpredictable environments. A sudden movement in the foliage, a faint scent carried by the wind, or a barely audible shift in sound could trigger immediate responses from the group. Each action, whether cautious or proactive, was informed not only by what an individual perceived, but also by the subtle cues communicated through posture, gaze, or gesture. In this way, intuition became a shared language, invisible yet powerful, that shaped every decision from migration routes to hunting strategies. The ability to harmonize perception and action created a unique cohesion. The group functioned almost as a single organism, with each member sensing the environment in tandem, predicting threats and opportunities before they became apparent. This interdependence strengthened bonds, reinforced trust, and amplified the effectiveness of survival strategies. The smallest misalignment could jeopardize the entire group, which made attentiveness and responsiveness essential. Every individual, from the youngest to the most experienced, played a role in this silent orchestra of perception. Cinematically, we can envision this dynamic as a choreography of motion and awareness. The subtle shift of a head, a whispered gesture, a momentary pause, all transmitting meaning without words. Each member's intuition fed into the collective, creating a feedback loop that amplified perception and decision-making. These interactions were instinctive yet learned, forming a culture of anticipatory thinking that allowed humans to navigate a dangerous and complex world successfully. Over time, this shared intuition became embedded in the culture and behavior of early humans. It guided migrations, resource gathering, and the protection of the vulnerable. The collective awareness ensured that even when individuals faltered, the group as a whole maintained balance and security. It was a wisdom born of necessity, refined over countless nights, days, and generations, forming a foundation upon which all subsequent survival strategies and spiritual insights were built. Sometimes survival hinged on a single perception, a sudden instinct, a fleeting insight that could alter the course of an entire group. Early humans were attuned to these subtle signals, sensing shifts in the environment that others might overlook. A slight change in the wind, an unusual rustle in the grass, or the behavior of a lone animal could trigger a cascade of decisions. In those moments, one individual's intuition might guide the entire tribe to safety, food, or shelter, demonstrating that survival was often less about strength and more about perception and quick response. These hunches were not random guesses, but deeply informed reactions shaped by experience, observation, and inherited wisdom. The selected individuals, those trained by years of observing patterns in nature, could read signs invisible to the untrained eye. Their instincts were honed through countless nights, mornings, and silent watches over the land. Each hunch was a culmination of accumulated knowledge, a decision born from the integration of sensory data, memory, and foresight. Acting on these insights could mean the difference between life and death for an entire generation. The influence of one perception extended beyond immediate danger. These early humans recognized that certain actions had long-term consequences. Choosing to migrate to a new location, avoiding a predator's path, or adjusting hunting strategies based on intuition ensured not only survival, but also the preservation of culture and knowledge. The tribe relied on these individuals, understanding that intuition was a powerful tool that carried forward lessons from past experiences and embedded the future within present actions. Cinematically, these moments unfold as tension-filled sequences. The rustle of leaves prompts a sudden halt, eyes narrow, and the tribe responds in perfect synchrony to an unspoken cue. The individual's body language, the subtle tilt of the head, the slight pause before action, all communicate urgency and strategy without a word being spoken. These intuitive decisions ripple through the group, creating a dynamic of anticipation and reaction that defines the very rhythm of survival. Even today, this legacy of intuitive foresight lingers in our instincts. The ability to sense risk, detect opportunity, and make split-second decisions is inherited from these ancestral practices, a reflection of the refined perception that shaped generations of humans. Through these moments, we can glimpse how deeply interconnected observation, intuition, and survival were, and how a single hunch could alter the destiny of many. Even after hundreds of thousands of years, the legacy of early humans' wisdom still pulses within us. The instincts, intuitions, and subtle perceptions that guided survival in a world filled with danger have not disappeared. They manifest in our ability to sense patterns, anticipate outcomes, and respond to situations almost instinctively. The knowledge that once required careful observation of animal behavior, shifting winds, or fleeting shadows has evolved into an inner compass that often guides our decisions, even without conscious awareness. This is the invisible inheritance of those who lived 900,000 years ago. A silent code that continues to shape the choices we make today. This ancestral wisdom connects us to our origins in ways we rarely recognize. From the split-second reactions to potential hazards to the deep understanding of social dynamics, our cognitive and emotional instincts carry traces of the lessons passed through generations of observation and survival. Small groups preserve knowledge not through writing, but through rituals, gestures, and practices that cultivated attention, reflection, and intuition. The patterns they observed in nature, the signals they decoded in darkness, and the instincts they nurtured formed a continuous chain of insight, one that extends into our modern lives, often subtly influencing our awareness and decisions. Cinematic reconstruction helps us imagine how these ancestral behaviors became internalized. We see small groups moving as one, guided by intuition, responding to the environment and each other with an almost preternatural synchrony. Every glance, every gesture, every silent understanding contributed to the continuity of knowledge. Even without the explicit messages of elders or the direct teachings of firekeepers, the essential wisdom persisted, embedding itself in the instincts, attentions, and emotional intelligence of each new generation. As you reflect on this, consider how your own intuition, your ability to sense danger or opportunity, may be shaped by this ancient lineage. The connection between observation, intuition, and survival is not just history. It is embedded within us, a living inheritance. If you've followed this journey until now, it means you are part of this continuum of awareness. So take a moment to engage. Leave a comment with the phrase, "This message was for me." If you feel the resonance of this ancestral wisdom, like the video if you found these insights compelling, and make sure you are subscribed to continue exploring the depth of human history and intuition. And while you're here, there's a video right next to this one that dives even deeper into the messages our ancestors left behind. Click over and continue this journey. Discovering the layers of perception, instinct, and intuition that shaped human history will transform the way you understand your own awareness today.